My name is Jack Miller. If you were to walk into my office today on the 45th floor of the Zenith Tower in downtown Chicago, you would see a man who looks like he was born in a suit. You would see the Italian leather shoes, the panoramic view of Lake Michigan, and the heavy oak desk that costs more than my father made in a decade. You would see a man commanding a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire, signing off on grants that change the lives of thousands. But you wouldn't see the real me. The real me is still down there, in the grime, under a sink in a rusted-out trailer park in Ohio, smelling like pipe sealant and mildew. The real me is a man whose hands are permanently etched with the memory of cold copper pipes and the vibration of a struggling sump pump. The real me is a man who was broken into pieces so small, I thought the wind would just blow me away. To understand the man in the suit, you have to understand the plumber who died to create him. It began in a life that felt small but full. I lived in a drafty two-bedroom rental in a suburb of Columbus with my wife Sarah. I was a plumber by trade, a man of the trades in a world that often looked down on dirty fingernails. I worked 50, sometimes 60 hours a week, crawling into crawl spaces filled with spiders and rot, unclogging the messes people didn't want to touch. But the plumbing didn't pay enough for the dream we had. So, 3 nights a week, I put on a polyester uniform that was a size too tight in the shoulders and drove to the Westgate Mall. I walked the empty, echoing corridors from 10 o'clock p.m. to 6 a.m., a security guard watching over mannequins and locked gates. My feet ached with the dull, throbbing rhythm that became the soundtrack of my life. I drank stale coffee from a thermos and ate cold sandwiches, fighting sleep, fighting exhaustion. I did it all for Sarah. We had been married for 10 years. A decade of love, yes, but a decade defined by a single gaping absence. We wanted a baby. It wasn't just a want. For Sarah, it was a hunger. It was a physical need that seemed to consume the oxygen in our house. We tried everything. The ovulation kits, the temperature charts, the legs-up-the-wall gravity tricks. We turned our intimacy into a tactical operation. And every month, the crash would come. The period would arrive, or the plastic stick would show a single, solitary line. The silence that followed was deafening. I would hold her while she wept, her body shaking with a grief that felt disproportionate to the event, but was entirely real to her. She would whisper into my chest, her tears soaking my shirt. We drained our savings. We maxed out credit cards I had been working 2 jobs to pay off. We went to specialists, cold, clinical men in white coats who spoke in jargon. Finally, after years of this torture, we sat in the office of a Dr. Evans, a reproductive endocrinologist who charged $500 just to say hello. I remember the texture of the waiting room chairs, rough, scratchy fabric. I remember the sound of the clock ticking, louder than my own heartbeat. Sarah was vibrating, her fingernails digging into my palm. Dr. Evans called us in. He sat behind a glass desk looking at a manila folder that contained the biological sum of our lives. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," he began, adjusting his glasses. He went into the technicalities: follicle-stimulating hormone levels, ovarian reserve, uterine scarring. I saw Sarah's eyes darting back and forth, trying to catch hope like a firefly in a jar. But there was no hope in that room. The doctor's voice dropped an octave. "The conclusion, unfortunately, is definitive. Sarah, your condition is congenital. You have a severe form of ovarian failure combined with structural anomalies." The silence that hit the room was violent. I watched Sarah. I saw the light in her eyes. The light that had kept me working double shifts, the light that made her Sarah, flicker and die. She went pale, a sickly, grayish white. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped on concrete. I knew her. I knew that she defined her worth as a woman by her ability to be a mother. I knew that if she walked out of this room knowing she was the broken one, it would destroy her. She would hate her body. She would hate her life. She might never recover. The doctor stood up. "I'll give you a moment." He stepped out. The door clicked shut. In that 5 seconds, I made a choice. It was reckless. It was stupid. But it was done out of a love so fierce it blinded me to the consequences. I turned to Sarah. I grabbed her cold, limp hands. "Sarah, look at me," I commanded. She stared at me, unseeing. He told me," I lied. My voice was steady, though my stomach was churning acid. Before we came in, he pulled me aside in the hallway. Her eyes focused on me, confused. "It's not you," I said, squeezing her hands. He was trying to be polite, talking about your levels. But the real reason, the main reason, is me. I'm sterile, Sarah. My count is 0. I waited for the grief. I waited for us to cry together, for her to say, "It's okay, we have each other." I was not prepared for the rage. It started as a tremor in her jaw. Then, she snatched her hands away from mine as if I were burning her. She whispered. The whisper grew into a scream. "You? All this time? 10 years, Jack. 10 years I've been drinking those vile teas, taking those hormones, injecting myself with needles. I thought I was the problem. Sarah, please," I begged, reaching for her. She shrieked, backing into the corner of the office. "You let me believe I was broken. You liar, you wasted my youth." We drove home in silence, a thick, suffocating silence. When we got to the apartment, she went into the bedroom and locked the door. I slept on the floor in the living room. I thought she needed time. I thought, she's hurting. She'll realize that adoption is an option. She'll realize I love her. I was a fool. A week later, I came home from a grueling 10-hour shift at a construction site. My boots were caked in mud. I was carrying a box of her favorite chocolates, hoping to bridge the gap. The front door was standing wide open. I walked in. The apartment echoed. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. The TV was gone. The photos on the wall were gone, leaving rectangular dust outlines. The closet was empty. On the kitchen table, where we had eaten 1,000 breakfasts, sat a single sheet of lined notebook paper and a thick envelope. I picked up the note. "Jack, I can't look at you. Every time I see your face, I see the time I lost. I see the family I'll never have because of your failure. You lied to me by omission for years. You aren't the man I thought you were. I want a divorce. My lawyer has already drawn up the papers. Sign them and send them. Don't call me." I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Signed in aggressive, jagged blue ink. The world tilted. My vision blurred at the edges. I dropped the chocolates. I fell to my knees, then to my side. I lay on the linoleum floor, still wearing my muddy boots, and I didn't get up until the sun went down. The next 6 months were a blur of gray. I was a zombie. I signed the papers. I let her take the car, the savings, the furniture. I didn't fight for anything because I felt I deserved nothing. I had tried to save her pain, and instead I had detonated my own life. I quit the security job. I stopped taking new plumbing clients, only doing emergency work when the rent was due. I stopped shaving. My beard grew in patchy and wild. I lost 30 pounds. I sat in that empty apartment, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, wondering why God gave people the capacity to love if He was just going to use it to crush them. Then came the night of the storm. It was a Tuesday in late November. A freezing rain was hammering against the windows, rattling the glass. It was 2:30 a.m. I was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a dirty blanket. My phone rang. I groaned and rolled over. It rang again, persistent, annoying. I grabbed it, ready to curse out whoever was on the other end. I barked, "I'm sleeping!" There was a silence on the line. Then, a voice on Dienasme. It wasn't angry, it wasn't a telemarketer. It was the voice of an old woman, soft, crackling, but with a strange, serene strength underneath it. "Sorrow is a heavy blanket, son," she said. "But life is too short to stay under it." I froze. The anger evaporated, replaced by a strange confusion. "Who? My name is Evelyn Higgins," she said. "My basement is flooding, and I'm an old woman alone in a big house." I rubbed my face. "Lady, I'm not—" "Please," she said. Just one word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 prayers. I sighed. I drove through the blinding rain to the north side of town, to a neighborhood of old money and old trees. I pulled up to 404 Oak Street. It was a Victorian mansion, beautiful but melancholic. The paint was peeling slightly, the hedges overgrown. It looked like a house that was waiting to die. Evelyn met me at the door. She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall, wrapped in a lavender shawl. She had hair like spun silver and eyes that were piercingly blue. She leaned on a cane, but she looked at me with an intensity that made me want to straighten my posture. "Thank you for coming," she said. I went down to the basement. It was a disaster. A main supply line had burst. The water was shin-deep, freezing cold. I waded in. For the next 3 hours, I battled that pipe. I cut the water. I sawed through the rusted iron. I sweated. I bled when a wrench slipped and gashed my knuckles, but I fixed it. I pumped the water out. When I came back upstairs, wet and shivering, it was nearly dawn. The storm had passed. "I'll mail you the bill," I mumbled, heading for the door. I just wanted to go back to my hole and hide. "You will do no such thing," Evelyn said. She was standing in the kitchen doorway. The smell of roasting meat wafted out. "You look like a ghost, Jack Miller. You look like a man who hasn't eaten a hot meal since the summer." I hesitated. "I'm dirty, ma'am. Chairs can be cleaned. Souls are harder to scrub." I sat. She served me pot roast, tender, savory, with potatoes and carrots that tasted like childhood. She poured me hot tea. I took one bite, and the dam broke. I don't know why. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the kindness of a stranger. But I put my fork down and buried my face in my grease-stained hands and wept. I sobbed like a child. Evelyn didn't say a word. She just sat across from me, her hands folded, waiting. When I finally stopped, she handed me a handkerchief. "Now," she said, and I did. I told her about Sarah. I told her about the infertility. I told her about the lie. I told her how I destroyed my marriage to save my wife's ego, and how she destroyed me in return. Evelyn listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, the sun was coming up through the kitchen window. "You are a fool, Jack," she said softly. "But you are a noble fool." She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was like dry paper. "My husband died 20 years ago. I have no children. This house is full of silence." That morning changed the trajectory of my existence. I started going to Evelyn's house every few days. At first, it was to fix things. A loose step, a drafty window, but soon the repairs were just excuses. I went for the meals. I went for the talks. She was brilliant. She told me stories of her life, of the business her husband built, of the travels she had taken. She scolded me when I slouched. She made me shave my beard. "I want to see the face of the man I'm feeding," she'd say. I started working again. Real work. I took on contracts. I hired an assistant. Evelyn gave me my confidence back. She made me realize that my worth wasn't tied to Sarah's opinion of me. For 2 years, this was my life. I was happy. I had a purpose. Then came the week the phone didn't ring. It was a Tuesday. Evelyn always called on Tuesday morning to give me a grocery list or tell me a joke she heard on the radio. The phone was silent. I called her. Voicemail. By Wednesday evening, a cold dread settled in my gut. I left work early and drove to Oak Street. As I turned the corner, my heart stopped. There were 3 police cruisers in the driveway. An ambulance was parked on the lawn, its lights off. I slammed my truck into park and ran toward the house. A police officer stepped in front of me. I screamed, though I wasn't. I'm her friend. Is she okay?" The officer's face softened into that pitying look I had come to hate. "I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. Higgins passed away sometime in the night. It looks like natural causes." I fell to my knees on the wet grass. I cried for her in a way I hadn't even cried for the end of my marriage. Sarah leaving was a wound. Losing Evelyn was an amputation. She was the only person in the world who truly saw me. A week later, I stood in the rain at the cemetery. It was a small service. Just me, a few distant cousins who checked their watches every 5 minutes, and Evelyn's lawyer, a stern man named Arthur Sterling. After the coffin was lowered, Sterling approached me. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice gravelly, "I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. "I don't want anything," I said, wiping my eyes. "You need to come," Sterling insisted. I went. I sat in a leather chair in a high-rise office, feeling out of place in my khakis and work boots. Sterling opened a thick leather binder. "Mrs. Higgins was a unique woman," Sterling said. He slid an envelope across the desk. I opened it. My hands were shaking. "My dearest Jack, I was all alone in that big, echoing house until a stormy night brought a plumber to my door. You fixed my pipes, but then you stayed to fix my heart. You listened to an old woman when the world had decided I was invisible. You have a good soul, Jack, but you carry too much pain. I got the call from the good Lord, and I knew my time was short. I wish for you to stop just surviving. I want you to live. I want you to work hard, not out of desperation, but out of passion. Take care of the ones who need help, the way you took care of me. I have made my will to leave you everything, the house, the accounts, and the company. Goodbye, my son. If there is another life, I hope I get to be your real mother." I looked up at Sterling, tears streaming down my face. "What company?" Sterling took a deep breath. "Jack, Evelyn wasn't just a widow. She was the majority shareholder and owner of Higgins Pharmaceuticals." He turned a page. "The total value of the estate, including real estate, stocks, and liquid assets, is approximately $340 million. I sat there, the plumber from Ohio, and I couldn't breathe. I was a millionaire 300 times over. The transition was terrifying. I wanted to run. I didn't know how to run a company. I didn't know how to wear a suit. But I remembered Evelyn's voice. Stand up straight, Jack. So, I did. I kept Sterling as my advisor. I hired the best executives money could buy to handle the science. But I took over the heart of the company. I changed everything. We stopped squeezing profits out of life-saving drugs. I launched massive philanthropic initiatives. I built Evelyn's Haven, a network of orphanages and shelters across the state. I spent my days in boardrooms and my nights visiting the shelters, making sure the kids had warm beds and hot meals. I became a man of power, a man of respect. 5 years passed. I was 40 years old, wealthy, respected, and content. I thought the past was dead. Then, my secretary buzzed me on the intercom. "Mr. Miller, I have a woman on the line. She says it's a personal emergency." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air left the room. I stared at the phone for a long minute. "Put her through," I said, my voice tight. Her voice was trembling. It sounded thin. broken. "Jack, is it really you? I saw your picture in the paper." "It's me, Sarah," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I need to see you," she sobbed. "Please." I agreed to meet her. Not at my office. I didn't want her in my sanctuary. We met at a small diner downtown. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The vibrant, beautiful woman I had married was gone. In her place was a ghost. She was thin, gaunt. Her clothes were expensive but worn, and there was a dark bruise blooming on her cheekbone, hastily covered with concealer. She sat down, refusing to look me in the eye. "Jack," she whispered, "I made a mistake." She told me the story. A year after leaving me, she married a man named Richard Henderson. He was wealthy, the owner of a massive logistics firm. He was charming at first, but soon the mask fell. He was controlling, jealous, and violent. "We were trying for a baby," she said, her voice cracking. "Richard insisted we see a specialist in New York." She looked up at me then, and her eyes were filled with a devastating mixture of shame and realization. "The doctor ran the tests, Jack. The same tests we did years ago. He sat us down and told me. He told me I was born with ovarian agenesis. He said I have never been able to have children." She started to weep openly. "He said there was no way it was ever your fault." She reached across the table, grasping for my hand. "You lied. You took the blame. You let me call you less of a man. You let me divorce you. I loved you," I said simply. "Richard broke me anyway," she spat. "When he found out I was defective, he beat me. He said he didn't want a broken wife. I ran away last night. Jack, he's powerful. He says he'll ruin me." I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest. Not at Sarah. I was past anger for her, but at this man, this bully. I asked. "Henderson Logistics," she sniffled. I froze. I pulled out my phone. I dialed my chief operating officer. "Bill, it's Jack. Pull up our distribution contracts." "Yes, sir," Bill answered. "They handle about 70% of our shipping." "Cancel it," I said. My voice was ice. "You heard me. Invoke the morality clause in the contract. Gross misconduct by ownership. Terminate the contract effective immediately. I want our trucks pulling out of their depots within the hour. And Bill, call our competitors." "Understood, Mr." I hung up. I looked at Sarah. "He's done," I said. "Without my contract, his leverage is gone. The banks will call his loans by Monday." Sarah stared at me. She looked at the suit, the watch, the way I commanded the world around me. She realized, finally, what she had thrown away. "Jack," she whispered, sliding her hand further toward mine. "I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was cruel. But I'm here now. I know the truth. I know how much you loved me. Can we try again?" I looked at her hand. I remembered how that hand used to feel in mine. I remembered the love, but I also remembered the empty house. I remembered the letter. I remembered the silence. I pulled my hand away. "Sarah," I said, my voice gentle but final, "I forgive you. I truly do," she cried. "I loved you enough to destroy myself for you," I said. "But when things got hard, you didn't stand by me. You didn't ask questions. You just left. Time shows the true character of a person, Sarah. You walked out when the sun went down." She slumped back, defeated. "I have nothing, Jack. I have no husband. I have no children. I have no purpose." I stood up. I walked to the window of the diner and looked out at the city. I thought of Evelyn. I thought of the second chance she gave me. I turned back to Sarah. "You always wanted to be a mother," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. I wrote a name on the back. I just opened a new wing at the St. Jude's Orphanage on the west side. It houses 60 children who have no parents, no home, and no love. They need caretakers. They need someone to read them stories, to wipe their tears, to hold them when they have nightmares. I slid the card to her. Go there, ask for Mrs. Gable. Tell her Jack sent you. It's a job, Sarah. But more than that, it's a family. If you want to be a mother, go be a mother to the children who actually need one. I buttoned my jacket. That is the closest you can be to me, taking care of the people I care about. I walked out of the diner. I didn't look back. That was 3 years ago. Richard went bankrupt and is currently awaiting trial for fraud. And Sarah, I visit the orphanage once a month to check on the facilities. I usually stay in the main office, but sometimes I look out the window into the courtyard. I see her there. She looks older. Her hair is tied back in a messy bun. She's wearing simple clothes, but she's surrounded by children. She's pushing a girl on a swing. She's holding a toddler on her hip. She's laughing. She never remarried. She never had a child of her own blood. But she is a mother to 100 children who call her by her first name. She found her peace. And me? I'm just a plumber who got lucky enough to meet an angel in a storm. I spend my days fixing leaks in the system, trying to make the world a little warmer, a little safer. I go home to a quiet house, but I am not lonely. I have my work. I have my memories. And somewhere, I know Evelyn is watching, smiling because her son finally turned out all right.